Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Quixotic topic. My name is Daquan, and today I'm joined by.
Benelli Amosa.
And today we will be talking about theater, or theater. And so, Benelli, you were the responsible for the North Carolina School of Science and Math's skits for Africa Fest, which is a cultural extravaganza that we have once a year. Would you mind telling me a little bit about your theatrical background and what inspired you to create skits?
Yeah, so I've just always really loved theater, like ever since I was young. Although I've always gone to like STEM-based schools, so I never got to really be exposed to theater. So when I first entered high school, I knew immediately that I wanted to join drama club and I wanted to audition for all of the plays that were offered. So ninth grade, first semester, I auditioned for a play and I didn't get in, and that really hurt because that was my first ever theater audition. But then for the second semester, sort of half play, half musical, Peter and the Starcatcher, I auditioned and I landed the role of, or a double role of Betty Bumbrick and teacher. And in this first production of mine, I had to fake a British accent, so that was just a really fun experience for me.
Do you still have it?
I feel like I do remember part of my monologue from Betty Bumbrick, so I could go into it and get my posh British on. I also watch a lot of Love Island,
Oh,
so I feel
word,
like
word.
that trash TV,
Yeah,
but
that would
really,
definitely help.
yeah, it definitely gets me in the zone of making British accent.
So I would assume that you watch a lot of performances and plays, seeing as that it is something you're passionate about. Do you have a specific favorite?
Well, most recently, this past summer, I got to see Waitress on Broadway, and I went because my favorite Broadway actor, Jeremy Jordan, he was performing there, and I knew I just absolutely had to go see him live. And so that live experience like made it my favorite musical because like there's definitely such a difference between listening to the recording on Spotify or something like that and being able to like see the stage lights and see these people like just perform these 8 shows a week. And then the really magical thing about Broadway that I found is that at the end of the show you can go outside and meet the actors, and I
Oh,
thought
really?
it was just such like a surreal experience, and they can like sign your playbills and programs. And so Waitress definitely became my favorite because of that.
Oh, word. So do you have dreams in sense of performing on Broadway eventually?
That is like a potential thing for me, although I'm not trying to go to school for singing or acting or anything like that. Although like I absolutely love to act and I love to sing, and it takes up a lot of like my extracurriculars because I do a cappella at the school and I'm also doing the musical. But I would like to go into film specifically.
Oh, okay.
I feel like with the film industry, it would be better, just like practically, in order to like get
Right,
a solid
right.
career and stuff like that.
Definitely.
Whereas trying to become an actress or a singer or a combination of the two, that would be just be very difficult for me to accomplish.
So from what you've told me, it seems that you're very proficient in terms of acting. What are some difficulties that you've encountered throughout your semi-professional career?
I feel like there is a bit of just making sure that I don't mess up because in rehearsal you can like get it down and get it down, but then the second that you're on that stage, you basically just have this one shot in front of this audience to get it right, and they don't know what you've been doing for like these past few months and how hard you've been working. And so then if you just mess up on stage, it
Then,
looks
like,
like you didn't like put in the effort that you really did, because it's just this one time that you get to do it.
Definitely, it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, it's very nerve-wracking to make sure that you get it all down, but if you do get it all down, it's this like huge relief
Right,
to know
right.
that
Like
you
a
did
really
that.
big shot of dopamine, I would assume.
Yeah, exactly. Like you did this.
So, when it comes to creating skits for like the skits that you made for Africa Fest, what inspired you to start writing per se? And like, do you have a background in writing skits?
I don't necessarily have a background in writing skits per se, but as I said before, I've always loved the idea of like acting in theater from a young age. Like we would watch movies and TV shows all the time in my household, so I was like, wow, acting is so cool. So whenever I would have the chance to, in all like my school projects, it would be like you can choose any like form to present your project, something like that. And I would always just go for a video or a skit, basically.
Right.
So I'd always be writing for that.
Okay.
And so when it came to Africa Fest and I saw that there were options for committee heads and that I saw skit committee head, I was like, that is my calling right
Yeah.
there. Because I love to perform, and so like writing skits is obviously going to be a part of that. And I just have like a bunch of ideas like floating around in my head, and so I feel like I really want to like write those down, like have those come to fruition.
So, do you have like, I guess you said you wanted to pursue film. Do you have like a backlog of potential movie ideas?
I do actually, yes.
Would you
So
like to tell some of them?
yeah, so I was thinking that I could potentially have this sort of dual perspective film. Like for me, I really like the genre of drama in film, and I also really like it when films don't necessarily have a happy ending and it's like a bittersweet sort of thing.
Okay.
Because I feel like a happy ending almost makes it like
Cliche.
too easy. Yeah, cliche, almost too easy for the audience. I like the audience to come back from a film like feeling just the widest range of emotions that they can,
Hmm.
and like whether it be like anger and sadness and happiness all like bundled together. So this idea I had was going to be this dual perspective between like within a relationship,
Hmm.
and it was going to be um, like a day or like even like a week taken from one perspective where the camera is like as the person, so you're seeing it through their like lens basically, and you're going to see that like their partner is like very like rude towards them, like not really great at all.
Not the
doesn't-
best relationship.
Yeah, doesn't really care about them. But then like halfway through it switches to the other perspective, so now you're the other person. But then you see that on the other way around, the partner that you were just seeing from the perspective of is actually like just as bad, if not worse. But
Oh,
then
wow.
by the end, you see them like still so totally in love. So it just kind of like the audience, I just want them to feel a little bit like frustrated or something like that.
Yeah, I've actually like never heard of a concept like that before. That's really interesting. That's definitely something I would probably want to see.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite movie?
Yes, I do have a favorite movie. My go-to is always Titanic.
Titanic, a classic.
I cry every time I watch it.
Mm.
The music is so beautiful, and then like when I was younger and I would watch Titanic with like my eyes closed for some parts, obviously because my parents want to censor it. But I've always loved Titanic. But now like that I'm more into film and I can like actually look at the different parts of it and appreciate it a lot more, I feel like I am able to see different components and be like, wow, that was such like a good choice.
Mhm.
Let me look at like the cost of design and how like precise it was in looking at like establishing like different like social classes and stuff like that.
Right.
And then
Right.
obviously, like as I said before, the music has like such a giant impact on when you're watching it.
Definitely. How much would you say music plays an important role in creating theatrical performances in movies?
When it comes to theatrical performances, I feel like music doesn't really play as much of a role. Like for me, music on stage almost can be sort of cheesy in a way,
Hmm.
because I feel like the way that the sound is mixed sometimes it just sort of takes away from the actual like stage performance.
Right, right.
And that's like such a what makes film like so different from theater, and also like obviously film is similar to theater,
Mhm.
but it also is so different because you get to have like so many different options and like the perspectives that you're filming from, and also with the sound, because a horror movie, for example, like that's
Right.
like the most obvious example. If you
Using-
don't have that like build up of like this orchestra with like a screeching violin, the movie's not going to be nearly as scary.
Right, definitely.
But I feel like musicals are also just very different from like a stage performance having
Mhm.
music in it. Like I absolutely love musicals because obviously music's supposed to help progress the story,
Hmm.
and I think that's just a really amazing way to
You know,
like portray something new.
I've actually never really been able to get behind musicals. I don't know. It's something about them. It's just like, to be fair, I haven't had very much exposure to them. In fact, like the number one musical I can tell you, and it's probably obvious, is High School Musical. That's like the.
I thought you were about to say Hamilton is the most obvious.
Oh well, I mean that's also a very big one. But one of the first ones to come to mind is High School Musical, and I remember when I was like a little kid watching it, I was just like, this isn't really gripping, because like I was so used to the regular format of I guess like the hero story in a movie where like there's a rising action, a climax, and a falling action denouement. And of course that it does exist in a musical, but I guess like the shift in how it's presented was a bit too much for like my 11-year-old brain. Seeing now that I am much older and could probably appreciate the medium a bit more, do you have any musicals that you would recommend?
It's kind of hard to say. Like for me, my siblings were perform in musicals like in their high school career.
Mhm.
So I didn't watch High School Musical until I was like 11 or 12. So I had been out for a very long time, but never really watched it. So I want to say, and this may be wrong, like my memory may be failing me, but I think that the first musical that I watched perform was with my older sibling, and they were in Hairspray, and they played Little Inez. And so when I first watched that, I thought that was like so amazing. And then I saw the movie, and that was also just a hoot, being able to see like John Travolta dressed up like as a woman and stuff like that, and like Zac Efron as this super charismatic person. So definitely Zac Efron in High School Musical is a different Zac Efron in Hairspray, I will say that.
Word.
But it's also like a difference between seeing a musical or like listening to it or watching the movie version of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like a good musical maybe to start out with would be Hairspray, the movie version, because it is like such a fun thing with like a powerful message. And then there's also Hamilton, obviously, but I feel like that's not necessarily representative of a lot of Broadway musicals because there's like rap and like hip hop elements to it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like the classic musical you're going to be listening to is like the Broadway show tunes, you know, like this big like belting sound.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like the sort of thing that you would find, I guess, like in Chicago or something, which we are doing at the school January 31st to February 2nd. Shameless plug-in.
Oh no, you're perfectly fine. So you said that Hamilton is more of a detraction from the more classical kind of stereotypical what you would think of when you think of a theater. You think big opera houses, big red rosy seats and ushers. How do you feel that the medium as a whole has evolved, especially now that we're heading to the end of the decade?
I think it's definitely become more inclusive and touches on a lot like more subjects in a way. Like with Hamilton, like it became so well known because of its diverse casting and incorporating like hip hop into its songs. I feel like that was really awesome because a lot of times I feel like people of color aren't necessarily as into theater or as into like Broadway because it doesn't necessarily seem accessible because like it is like expensive to go see a Broadway show, but also you're not going to always see like a diverse casting. So I feel like Hamilton was really important with that. And then Dear Evan Hansen is also like a new-ish musical, and that deals with like suicide and depression and stuff like that. And I feel like that is something that you would definitely not find in older musicals. So like as time has gone by, musicals have definitely become more powerful and like just they take more of like a stand in their messages.
Right.
Yeah.
So recently, you said that one of the first musicals that you saw was Hairspray with your sister?
Yeah, they use they them, so we're just gonna call them my sibling.
Right, or sibling, sorry. So does your family have a theatrical background? Like, does the majority of your family tend to perform?
So pretty much everyone except for my mom, I think, unless I need to go talk to her and she has a theatrical background. But so I always like associated like with my oldest sibling with doing theater. But then my older brother also did theater at this school too.
Oh,
he was in the Drowsy Chaperone, and he also did theater at like our home high school. And then I found this out recently, which I did not realize. My dad was also very involved in theater when he was in high school. He like was in a bunch of Shakespearean plays, and so I thought that was just so amazing. I was like, maybe that's why I love theater so much. Just runs in the family or something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine.
I'm definitely the one that's like most into Broadway right now. Like my oldest sibling, like they also love Broadway, but I'm usually the one that's like watching videos of like different Broadway stars, like interviews and just seeing them perform, stuff like that, and like trying to keep up and seeing like when shows are closing down, when they're going on tour. Whereas my mom and dad, I would have to like drag them to a show at this point.
So, with your infatuation with Broadway, I would assume that you have a lot of experience with Shakespearean plays. How do you feel, like, what is your general opinion towards, like, his writing style, I say, or, like, interpretations of his plays?
For me, I've always tried to like Shakespeare. It's not that I don't like Shakespeare. It's just that, like, in my own time, I wouldn't necessarily read him. But obviously, he does, like, have great works and stuff like that, and I do greatly respect him as a playwright. And, like, in 4th grade, I read The Merchant of Venice for the first time, like, unedited version, like,
wow,
full Shakespearean English. And that was a bit difficult for, like, 9-year-old me. But, like, since my dad and my sibling loved Shakespeare so much, I was like, I have to also get into it. So I did like read a bunch of Shakespeare plays, especially like when I was younger. So I read like King Lear, Taming of the Shrew, and obviously like as I went through school, they would make you read plays like Romeo and Juliet and stuff like that. But like generally, like if you're able to get through like the language, then I think like they are really interesting and they can reveal something about human nature and stuff like that. Like, especially like looking at the tragedies to see like what is the downfall of these people.
Definitely. I feel that, me personally, that Shakespearean plays, at least from what I've read, which is very little, I feel that they come from a very philosophical standpoint in a sense, especially when it comes to like the lessons that can be learned from them. I think that theater has like a very unique quality in the fact that it's able to reach some of the finer nuances of the human psyche that, like, for example, a film or a book or a TV show, like, they can't. Like, there's something so oddly intimate about a play, especially I've had speckled experience with being in plays and watching plays, but there's kind of a weird, I don't want to say ethereal, but kind of a atmosphere of togetherness of just like you and the show. It's so very like close. I think that's always something interesting to think about.
It's definitely like this magical feeling every time I go to see like a play or a musical that like I'm watching something but it's taking place like in front of me. You get to see like these seamless transitions between sets and things like that. And you just think about, wow, like what do they have to do to accomplish this?
Right.
So it is like definitely a surreal experience every time I get to see a show.
Definitely. And on the note of like how they pull things off, I've recently with my participation in some of the Africa Fest skits, I became privy to the amount of work that the technical crew does, and I feel like that's something that we don't really touch on much because everyone's always focused on like the glitz and glam of the actors being on the show for good reason, because like you don't see the tech crew. But it's really interesting to see just how technical these theaters can get, especially when it comes to pulling off stuff like lighting. And so my question to you is, seeing as that you're at a STEM school with a passion for things that isn't stereotypically STEM, how do you find kind of that middle ground?
Well, I feel like with the STEM part of it, it's always going to be like in my classes. Like I'm taking neuroscience right now and I'm in AP chemistry. So that's where all like the STEM concepts can come in. But then with all my extracurriculars, that really opens up like so much for me to like participate in. So I really am into like performing in the humanities. So they're all like amazing humanities courses here. But when it comes to extracurriculars, I don't really do STEM related things. So having the opportunity to like audition for musicals and be able to participate in Africa Fest, like all of the cultural fests that we have at the school, is a really amazing experience because you get to just have this time set aside to like practice and work on it and showcase part of your culture to the entire audience.
Yeah, definitely. It's again, a very magical experience. Do you feel that theaters and plays have been over commodified in the sense that it's like there's so much that goes around like the press in terms of like advertising it? Do you think that that in a way can take away from a show sometimes?
I don't necessarily think so. I feel like having it become more like commonplace is really awesome, and so that more people are able to experience it. Because I feel like oftentimes, at least that's how it felt like in my old school too. It just felt like theater was almost like narrow-minded in its way. Like it just didn't have this like huge outreach. Like there wasn't like always a huge turnout for like actual performances and stuff like that. So I feel like if it is getting like advertised more, then that's like a good thing, because I think that theater is something that everyone should try at least once.
Sure. Okay. So if you were responsible for motivating like kids or people of all ages actually to get into theater, what would you tell them?
I think that I would say probably that theater is a way to sort of have an escape as you get to just become another character where you don't have to think about like your problems of the day or anything like that. and you get to just bond with like this community of people, because everyone knows that is in theater that the rest of the cast that you're with, you become a lot closer because you have to like work together and you have to feel comfortable with each other. So like that's a really amazing thing to experience, to just have like this theater family where you get to like make theater jokes and stuff like that and just relate to each other. And especially with Tech Week, which is the week of tech rehearsal and dress rehearsal, the week of the performing weekend, and that is like the most stressful time for all theater geeks and stuff like that.
Because everything has to go relatively correct, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you're just like figuring out like the lighting and stuff on a very like condensed schedule. But I feel like, but having that like community of people to talk to and be like, oh man, I have this much work to do, but we have to be in Tech Week together, so we're doing it.
Definitely.
And then just being able to like have a way to just like perform in front of people, like I feel like just makes you like way more confident on stage. Like if you ever have like stage fright, like for me, if I'm like singing, for example, like just a solo in front of people, I'll be shaking, I'll be super nervous. But when it comes to just like acting on stage, it's like I hardly even notice the audience, and I just always feel so good afterwards.
Right. So when you are, here's a good question. Do you give the like picture everyone in their underwear if you're ever nervous? Do you give that any credence? Seeing as that you've had a lot more proficiency and experience acting, has that ever actually helped you?
I have never pictured anyone in there. The audience is just way too big to really like remove all of their clothes one by one like that. But like for me, like the lights are on you, so it's just like this like ocean, the sea of faces, right? So you don't really notice necessarily, like, because when you're acting, you're never really facing the audience unless you're trying to like give an aside direction to the audience, or like has some sort of like monologue. If you're just like interacting with other characters, you're going to be looking at those characters, like although you may be like projecting towards the audience. So I feel like when it comes to theater, it's a lot less stressful because obviously like there is this really vital connection of the actor to the audience, but if you just like let it flow as you would with any other rehearsal, then everything goes by really smoothly.
So would like the concept of a double-sided or two-way mirror, I think it's called, would that be a proper analogy in the sense that the audience can see you, but you can't necessarily see the audience?
Yeah, I think that'd be a very apt analogy in a way. Yeah. I really thought about it like that, but I think so.
Word. So compare like I guess that to singing. I'm guessing like the reason that that's a bit more nerve-wracking is because of the fact that that two-way mirror isn't there. And it's like you are directly engaging with the audience, and they're do you ever feel that like the audience is in a sense like judging you on the quality of your performance?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even just like walking down the hallways, I feel like there's people judging me and stuff like that. But like especially with singing, because you have to like make sure, like if you're performing with someone else, and like I have to make sure that you don't mess up with them and like don't throw them off. And like with singing, like you see all the people focus on you, whereas like if you're in a scene with other people, then they're going to not like only focus on you. They're going to be like taking in the scene as a whole. And I feel like that just like makes it a lot less stressful. Also, I'm singing as myself, rather than like acting as another person. And I feel like that can. Maybe that is
like
why
you can't really hide behind the proverbial mask of I am not this person.
Yeah. Well, like so you were in 2 of my skits, I believe, right? So what was like the experience for you to like not get nervous on stage?
The experience, honestly, in order to not get nervous, I mainly just, as you said, focused on my lines. I felt that my potential anxiety to the audience wasn't as much as my desire to perform well and like execute the fest properly, because like as you said, it definitely with tech rehearsal and whatnot, it's a lot of pressure to pull off, and so I really just wanted to get it right, and so I put most of my energy into just performing my lines to the best of my ability, and before I knew it was pretty much over. It goes like, it's weird that you have that sort of altered state of consciousness when you're on the stage, where it's like everything seems to go faster than it actually did. If I think back to when I was performing at Africa Fest, I would say that my performances couldn't have lasted for more than like 30 seconds. But of course, I was up there collectively for about 5 minutes. And so like that exponential difference in realized time and actual time, I think is definitely something that is important to factor in when it comes to anxiety. It's like it'll be over quicker than you think.
Yeah, exactly. And like for me, unless I make like some sort of egregious error on stage, then like after performance, I will just like not remember anything that just happened on stage. Like it happens like especially with like my plays and stuff like that. I'll just wonder like, did I say that line correctly or something like that? I just won't remember at that
Right,
point
right.
because it just went by and it went smoothly and stuff like that. Yeah.
Definitely. And so when it comes to egregious mistakes, what can you do to like shore that up in a sense? Is like, well, I guess the first question that we should ask is, have you had any grand acts of messing up on stage before?
Yes,
Mm.
but people didn't notice apparently.
Oh.
So like the thing I like tell everyone like for all the skits and stuff like that is just like if you mess up, don't say oh sorry or oh that wasn't right, anything like that. Just like keep going with it. And yeah, people as long as just try to make sure that people don't notice because no one knows the script or anything like that like you do.
Right.
So like if you mess up and you know in your head that you messed up, if you are able to just like continue going with it and like make sure it doesn't like detract from the actual show, then it's fine. Like I remember it was in a rehearsal, so it wasn't like too bad that it happened. But the person I was in a scene with, he was supposed to like ask my name so I could like introduce myself, but he didn't do it. He like skipped that line, and I was like, oh dear, how am I going to like how are people going to actually know what my name is? Because later on he references my character, so I'm like, okay, I should like slip that in. So I just like slipped it in, and it was like totally fine.
Okay, cool. And so, other than that, have you like when you were watching a play, have you seen anyone make like a large mistake in that same vein?
Not that I can directly recall. I feel like so I was the student director for the first trimester show Lost Girl,
Mm-hmm.
and I was there at every rehearsal every day. And so by that point, I basically knew like the entire script because I had to see it performed so many times. So like I would be watching the show and I hear like someone mess up. I'm like, I know the mess up, but I doubt like any other people actually would.
Definitely. Do you think that memorizing like scripts and memorizing lines has assisted in your ability to recall things not related to theater?
I feel like it's probably the other way around for me at least.
Oh, okay.
Like I felt like I had already like a pretty decent memory when it came to that, so I was able to like apply it to theater when I like first started like auditioning and stuff like that.
Okay, cool. And then that like assisted you in your auditions.
Yeah, exactly. So that way you not have to like have your eyes glued to like the script that they give you in the audition the whole time, so you could like look up and like interact with people.
Right. And so, what are some of the things that you do to help like place yourself inside your character when you're acting?
I feel like just I was just like thinking about like who like the character is, like what the objective of the scene is, you know. And once you know the objective, then you can really like go into it and just take risks when acting and just like be like a big personality on like unless the character is supposed to be like a small timid person, you still want to like play that up. So like I feel like for me, at least in public or something, I'm usually like fairly subdued and I try not to like go too much in there, but because I'm on stage I have like the excuse to just like
Belt
come
out.
right out. Yeah.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. In terms of going back to musicals, and singing, there's a question I wanted to ask earlier, but how do you feel like the transition from like watching a musical being performed on stage versus like watching it behind like on a movie, for example? I'll bring Hairspray back up. You said that the movie was better. How do you like gauge that? Like, what is your criteria for evaluating? It's like, okay, well, me seeing this in person was better, or me seeing this on the screen was better.
I feel like, at least for me, always seeing it in person is better in a way because although like movies, they can add like a lot to it obviously, and having all these different like cinematographic choices made by the director and stuff like that. Like seeing it on stage and just like thinking about how like they're having so many different scenes and stuff like that, but they have this one confined area to execute all of this. And so I feel like taking that into account, you just have like such a great appreciation for what goes down behind the scenes. Whereas like for a movie, you can choose different locations and you have time to you are able to mess up because you can have multiple takes. Whereas on
Right.
stage, you have just
It has to be
the
like
one
one
time.
and done.
Exactly.
Right. So seeing as that you are very much like in the film and theater world, I would assume that means you're also privy to reviews and critics. So how exactly do you evaluate something that is bad? And I say that in air quotes. Like what do you look for in a bad performance, for example?
I feel like well, bad performance obviously. I think like objectively, a lot of people would be like if they forgot their lines or like if it was like disorganized, I guess
Hmm.
in a way, without like it being purposeful disorganization and chaos.
Hmm.
Because often like sometimes you're going to have like people like going all in different directions, but they're supposed to. But like if it's just like looking messy, because you want it to have like this seamless thing, as if you're watching it like take place in real life. So like
Hmm.
an important thing that I think like for theater and like movies too is that you want to feel like you're watching something take place like in real time in real life, and you don't want to be like taken out of that experience and just think about oh wait this is a play or oh wait this is a movie. You want to be able to connect with the characters and feel the emotions that they're feeling.
Hmm.
And so like if the actors just have like this monotone dead voice as they're like delivering their lines, then you're not going to really feel like connected to the performance.
Okay. And so, has there ever been a moment in which like you watched a performance and like you loved it, and then you saw the critics' receptions and they like tore it to pieces?
I feel like, yeah, there are definitely like a lot of movies that I've watched that I will just be like, wow, that was such an amazing movie. And also, like, I'll look like at the message of the movie, for example. But then the critics would be like, this was like
This was bad.
like a
No one
half
should watch it.
attempt. Yeah, like
Right.
I don't know what the director was thinking, stuff like that. I can't think of any like specific names off the top of my head, but like
Hmm.
I distinctly remember like loving a movie and then like seeing it have like 5% on Rotten Tomatoes, something like that.
How do you respond to like the subjectivity that goes into criticism?
Well, I just sort of don't pay attention to it really. Like a lot of times, critics will love a movie that I will just not like whatsoever. For example,
Hmm.
like Dunkirk, that was nominated for a lot of Oscars, but I did not enjoy that movie at all because it I wasn't able to like connect with it. It just seemed like very scattered about, and I didn't know what was happening half the time. It was just
Hmm.
very loud and not like a very interesting movie per se. But then like critics were raving about it. So anytime like we're getting ready to like go watch something, like we'll look at the reviews and be like, okay, cool, but we don't really trust it that much. So we're just
Okay.
gonna like see it for ourselves.
You take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely understand.
Like a whole salt block, we're gonna take it.
Large grain. With you performing consistently, has there been any time in which you received like almost instantaneous like what is generally your process to receiving feedback for things that you've performed in?
Well, when it comes to like actual performances, like when you come out from backstage, something like that, and like you greet all your friends, like they're never gonna tell you that you did badly,
Right.
or because like, you just spent like months preparing for this, so they're never going to be like, oh, yeah, you could have done a little bit better. But like when it comes to actual like rehearsals and stuff, like the directors, like they don't hold back. They like they're going to be like at least like somewhat nice, but like they're gonna call you out if you mess up or something like that, and like that's gonna happen obviously later on. They'll have like this little notepad where they get to write down their notes, and the notes are usually people specific. Like every now and then it might just be like project more or like enunciate more, but sometimes it'll be like, so and so on your line, you're saying it like this. Can you say it like this instead?
Sounds particularly scathing.
Yeah, sometimes it can be. Yeah, but also that you're just trying to like improve upon it.
Right, definitely. And so, a little bit earlier in the podcast, you touched on how being in theater has an intense focus on community in the sense that because of the fact that you're all under the strain in order to have a proper performance, you feel closer to the people that you're performing with. Have you seen that phenomenon happen in any other of sectors of your life?
For me, theater has had such a large thing in my life that I feel like that's the like prime example of it. But also, I feel like anytime you're in a performance setting, you're going to grow closer with those around you. So the acapella group I'm in, the Unicords, I feel like we're definitely a lot closer than it was last year.
Hmm.
And so like for before our very first performance at Coffee House, like the monthly talent show at school, I arranged so that the whole group could go eat at Deluxe, the restaurant.
Hmm.
And so I felt like that was just like a time to just like relax and just like have fun with each other and just enjoy each other's company. And also just a way to build each other up and make sure that like we all feel confident in our abilities, even though like there is a wide range of them.
Do you think it's possible for a group to perform and not have that closeness?
I feel like yes, it is possible, but like it's not going to necessarily feel as genuine
Hmm.
because you want to be able to like have it just be very comfortable and just going about because you don't want to be interacting like you're strangers on the stage
Hmm.
or else it's going to be like palpable. Like the audience might necessarily think like, oh, they don't look like they're friends or anything like that, but like it's gonna be like a sort of atmosphere that is set up in the theater, I feel like.
Okay, cool. I asked those questions because I've had a similar experience in which being put under duress has made me feel closer to people, and so that was kind of to try and see if there's like some psychological connection there because this is more general, but at the North Carolina School of Science and Math, it's fairly stressful. I feel like you can agree with me on that. But I remember when I was having to study for like this really big test. I believe it was second trimester of my junior year. Um, I was just studying really hard, and like when you're in the mode of studying, you don't really care about outwardly forces. You're kind of just focused on trying to understand the material. But I remember looking to like the left and right of me because I was in the lounge at the time, and there were other people who just sat there studying and like pretty much having the same kind of mindset as me. And so I looked at them and be like, "Hey, what are you studying?" And then they told me we're studying for the same thing. We ended up studying together, and now he's like one of my closest friends.
Oh well.
And so it's interesting to see how in like a completely different setting, a similar occurrence happens in the sense that people are drawn together in order to achieve a common goal.
Yeah, like like in academics, there's definitely this sort of like solidarity. I think especially at this school because a lot of times at the school you're going to get very low grades. But if other people get those low grades,
Right.
then
Then it
like you
doesn't
you
feel
feel
that
you feel
bad.
better about it because like I was struggling, but so were other people. And then same thing like with your studying story. I have so many of those and just like trying to like not fail together and just like wishing each other luck because like you genuinely like want everyone to succeed at this school.
Hmm.
So they most recently had like this neuroscience test that everyone was freaking out about, and so we're just trying to help each other out and just like go through all of our notes and exchange notes and stuff like that. And so I think that's just a really important thing to have is just have other people that know what you're going through and you
Hmm.
know that they're going through it,
Hmm.
so that you can just like work together on it and just make each other like feel better about like trying to achieve this goal.
All right, cool. And so we are approaching the 40-minute mark, so I'll start asking my final questions. When it comes to performing, how do you manage, like, seeing as an NCSM is very high stress, and that you are kind of absorbed into the whole daily routine of going to your classes, working on your homework, going to your classes, working on your homework? How do you balance that with being able to have so many humanities focused clubs, or like not even that, but just things that you're interested in and that you want to do? How do you find that like equilibrium?
Well, like when it comes to that routine of like, going to classes and then doing homework, like having those extracurriculars to cut in between,
Hmm.
like that time is really helpful because like it's going to class and then theater rehearsal and then another club and then homework. So that is like a bit stressful with like getting all my work done on time, but like I would never want to drop any of my clothes because like they're so nice to go to and like be able to like see the same familiar faces, and you can like talk a little bit about homework and like talk about your stresses, but then you can also just like talk about what you're working on like right now in this club setting.
Right. And so you tend to not bring the stressors of the outside world into your work when it comes to performing.
Yeah, I try not to. Like at theater rehearsal, especially when I was like student director, I was thinking, yeah, well, I could probably like do some homework while I'm here, while everyone else is on stage, and I'm like sitting in the audience right now. But then, like as I was doing, I was like, no, I can't do this. Like
Right.
I have to be like engaged with it. I'm going to
Definitely.
just like put away the homework. Like it'll get done when it gets done.
That's a very well, it's a bold mindset to have, especially when it's like um it, on the off chance that you end up getting sidetracked even more after your club finishes and the homework doesn't get done, and it's like you it's interesting to see how people like take those risks to do the things that they want to do. Um, Sometimes whether that be putting aside the things that they have to do. Um, and then even then that asks like bigger questions like what do you actually ever have to do as a
Yeah.
human? Like other than eat, drink, and sleep, I guess. But when it comes to, I guess, spreading your talent, maybe this would be a good way to end the podcast. What are some tips and tricks that you have for people who would like to pursue the theatrical fields?
I think just like try it out. You know, like the first step to doing it is to go to that audition. Like I remember back, I think like freshman or sophomore year, I had this friend that I hadn't seen in years, and I saw him auditioning for state play I was auditioning for, and I was just shocked. I was like, I never knew that you were interested in theater. He was like, yeah, it's my first audition. I was like, mine too. So like just having that first step into auditioning, because it can be like intimidating being surrounded by people that are like, oh, I've done community theater since I came out the womb. All right. So, but like just like trying it out, and if you don't get cast, like it's not the end of the world. Like it will hurt, and it's okay to hurt because like it. Although it seems trivial to not get cast in what you're really hoping to get cast in, like it hits so hard because you're like, what did I do wrong? Why wasn't I good enough? And just think about like there's other opportunities to like get into it and other opportunities to perform.
Hmm.
Like I didn't get like the role I wanted for the musical, for example, last year, but I still had Africa Fest, and like I was able to do skits there too. So there's other ways to like get involved in theater, even if it's not like a big thing. And just like doing the little things because I love to do skits, I love to do videos.
Hmm.
So just doing like those little things can just get you more involved with
Right.
that.
And so just generally have a fairly optimistic mindset about it and be able to seek opportunities if you look for them, and you'll probably find them.
Yeah, exactly.
All right,
Like
cool.
if you really want to do it, then like definitely go for it. And if you're like even not that sure about it, then you should still just go for it and see maybe you are like really about it, you just didn't know because you never tried.
And where there's a will, there's a way.
Exactly.
Word. Well, Benelli, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Quixotic topic. Is there anything else that you'd like to say?
I think that whoever listens to this needs to go and audition for the next theater production that like their community or like their school is holding, because it is a really amazing experience, and to just like get into like listening to musicals and listening to the songs. I know there are people that are like, oh, I don't like Broadway, but I've really given it like a solid try and just like explored different like genres within Broadway itself, because I feel like there's something for everyone and like something that everyone can connect to. I think it's really important to have like a connection.
Word. Thank you for joining me today. Again, this is Daquan from the Quixotic topic, signing out.